I've come to visit my friends and fellow practitioners with Ajahn as the senior monk here, who we share the same upajjhaya and the same teacher together, that being Lumpur Cha. And I feel glad to meet many of you who we have known in the past, and some of you have also known and practiced with Ajahn Cha, Lumpur Cha. We have all come to this place out of faith and devotion in the Buddha's teachings, and the Lord Buddha wants us to practice so that we can be free from greed, hatred and delusion, which leads to peace, which leads to the ending of all suffering, the path to Nibbana. Nibbana is that which is cool, which is the final cessation of all suffering. When we have greed, hatred or delusion in our minds are hot and on fire. And when greed, hatred or delusion diminishes in our minds, then our minds increase in coolness. And when the defilements decrease, then our mind becomes developed in tranquility and becomes more calm. In the beginning, practice is very difficult. Practice is very confusing. Practice is a burden. It doesn't go as we like. It is that which is meant to lift up the mind, to transform the mind. This thing that we call practice is only for the transformation of the mind. We have all studied the various teachings of the Buddha, and when we come to actually do practice, we need to focus on the practical aspects of those teachings and put aside just the information about the teachings, the academic understanding. That we need to put down, and we have to take up the practical application of those teachings in our daily life, so that we follow the method of practice laid down by the Lord Buddha and all the Aryas, laid down by the teachers like Ajahn Cha, Lumpur Cha. In the past, we have just followed our moods, followed our emotions, and that hasn't brought us any happiness. So now we're going to follow the teachings laid down by the Buddha, the path of practice, and that leads to Nibbana. So when we ordain as anigarikas or novices or monks, we have done so purely to practice. And practice means to train this mind, to train the mind so it stays in the present moment, so it grows in peace, so it overcomes the defilements. Practice is to overcome the tendency of mind to get lost in past and future. Practice is the path of overcoming happiness and sorrow, overcoming jealousies and conceits, overcoming desires and greeds and selfishness. Practice is the overcoming of the 5 hindrances. And when we overcome these things, that leads to peace, that leads to tranquility. Gammatana, what we call the foundation for practice, Gammatana, or practice of meditation, it means the work of the mind which works on the base. The practice of Kammatthana, the development of the mind as a meditation object, having a meditation object and working with that meditation object, has as its goal, has as its purpose, the stilling of the mind, the calming of the mind, the bringing of that mind to samadhi and ekagata, that is one-pointedness, the stillness of the mind, which the mind becomes totally one-pointed. Ajahn taught many methods and many techniques. He tended to be very broad in his approach to practice. So he didn't necessarily just emphasize one method of meditation, but encouraged diversity or a broad approach to meditation. For example, he would teach us to meditate on death. And death meditation is a very good form of meditation. It cuts off attachment to past and future. It brings us back to the present moment. It cuts through speculative thought. It cuts through our doubts and worries. It cuts through our concerns for the body. And it is extremely good to develop recollection of death, because it overcomes the speculative temperament. It overcomes doubt and fear. And if we recall death continuously, then we develop this mindful recollection of death and sustain our sati on that process of dying, that we will die at any time. Then if the mind develops this recollection of death over and over again, and sati is continuous on the concept of dying, then that continuation of the recollection, reflection, contemplation of death, then that leads the mind to peace. Then the mind, that citta, does not get lost in happiness or sadness, because it sees in relation to death, happiness and sadness is not important. We're not sure when we're going to die. There is no guarantee that we'll live beyond the day, beyond this night. So recollect on death, that we could die at any time, and all beings must die. Life is extremely uncertain. We don't know whether we're going to make it out on alms round. We don't know whether we're going to make it back from alms round. When people put food in your bowl on the alms round, then recollect all these people will one day die. I too will die. Recollect that one may not even make it back for the meal. One may die before the meal. This recollection of death cuts off the tendency of the mind to rush into the future, the tendency of the mind to go spinning into speculative ideas and proliferation. The Buddha and all the Aryas also passed away. The enlightened ones must also die. So we see that all things, all beings are impermanent. So this recollection is very useful for developing anicca sanya, the recollection, the perception of impermanence. It is very good for developing dukkha sanya, the recollection that all things are unsatisfactory. It is very good for developing anatta sanya, the perception that all things are not self. And this recollection of death leads to samatha, it leads to the tranquility of the mind, because it brings the mind to one point. And this one-pointedness takes the mind to peace. And so if we're developing this contemplation, the contemplation of death. It is a very useful subject for bringing the mind to peace. And then we see that life abounds, and everything is surrounded by death. Life is composed of death, and death is composed of life. This leads the mind, when it sees this way, to tranquility and peace. It can help make your mind peaceful. So I'm recommending the recollection of death as an extremely good way of contemplation, a way of reflection, investigation, so that it takes the active mind down to peace by developing the wisdom faculty, contemplating over and over again this aspect of death, this aspect of uncertainty of life. This can bring your mind to peace. When I began to practice, I reflected on death a lot, and I used this as my own form of meditation, and I contemplated continuously on death, and the body became light and the mind became very buoyant. But I had a doubt of whether the contemplation of death would take me into Appana Samadhi or not. But then I saw that it at least took the mind to Upajjhara Samadhi. And Upajjhara Samadhi, the mind is composed and strong enough and stable enough that we can then reflect and investigate. For example, investigate the four elements of this body, that this body is just made up of fire, earth, air and water. And by contemplating in this state of samadhi, of Upajjhara Samadhi, when the citta was solid and firm, then that samatha would lead to vipassana, because by holding the object in the mind, then by investigating that, it would lead to seeing anatta, dukkha and anicca, dukkha and anatta, seeing things change, unsatisfactory, and seeing impermanence. This development of the anicca sanya, the dukkha sanya and anatta sanya, the recollection, the constant recollection and perception of impermanence, the perception of unsatisfactoriness in all conditioned phenomena, the perception of not self. This is extremely important for the development of the mind. This leads to insight and understanding. We start to contemplate this body as in terms of these three characteristics, as changing, unsatisfactory and not self. We see the four elements in this body, the four elements being the earth element, fire element, water element and air element. We see that they come together and they break up. This body is just the coming together of these four elements, the sustaining for a period of time of these four elements. But eventually these four elements will divide up and go their own way. So it is with the power of samadhi that we can develop vipassana. The citta that knows and understands, that is vipassana. Vipassana means to see clearly. For the citta that sees clearly or knows clearly is the citta that develops insight. And that citta will develop insight through the power of holding something. Depends on the energy and the power of samatha. This is extremely important. Vipassana depends on the power of samatha. Insight depends on the power of samadhi. So when we see how important this is, then we take the mind to samadhi and develop vipassana. When we see that we can develop this perception of seeing the emptiness in all the elements. For example, the eye faculty, the faculty of the eye, the faculty of the ear, the faculty of the nose, taste, smell, touch. We see these all as empty and not self. They are just a faculty which arise and pass away. This is a way we can investigate and contemplate. We can bring our mind and bring these objects up in the mind and take them apart, contemplate, picharana, they say in Thai. The Thai word is to picharana, to reflect, to contemplate, to investigate, to take things apart, to consider things carefully. And this reflection and contemplation leads and develops samadhi and tranquility. We can develop contemplation to lead to samadhi, or we can develop samadhi leading to vipassana and contemplation or wisdom. Ajahn says that this, the development of investigation leading to samadhi is a correct form of practice. It is a correct path, especially for those people whose minds are not peaceful, whose minds find it very difficult to stay on one object, whose minds tend to be diversified and scattered. Then using recollection, contemplation and investigation is a skillful way of taking that mind, if one reflects on the three characteristics of phenomena, three characteristics of the body, three characteristics of these faculties of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, taste, touch, and mental faculty, then that takes the mind to peace, and that is correct practice. So then, when we practice this way, we'll see truth, we'll see the Dhamma. When we see truth, we see the Dhamma, then we become peaceful. The mind will absorb into peace. The mind, the citta, will become still and calm. When we reflect and contemplate often, he said, when we must reflect and contemplate often, to do it frequently, to repeat it over and over again, to reflect much, to do it often, not just once or twice, but continuously reflect on these aspects of Dhamma, investigate them frequently and often. If wisdom increases by this constant recollection, which it will do, then the kilesas, the defilements, will decrease. The defilements are strong because we do not reflect and develop wisdom. When we develop wisdom, then the defilements become weak. So we need to develop this contemplation of investigation, reflecting on things, contemplating the body over and over again, and that will decrease the defilements. When we practice this way, then the citta receives the Dhamma. The citta is receptive to the Dhamma, and the citta can know the Dhamma. The citta can know truth. The citta can see the Buddha, because when we see the Dhamma, we see the Tathagata. When we see the Tathagata, we see the Dhamma. And when we see the Dhamma, then that citta will overcome Sagaya Ditti, Vicikiccha and Silabbata Paramasa. It will overcome this Sagaya Ditti, this perception that the five aspects of body, feeling, thought, perception and consciousness are self, are me, are mine. It will overcome all doubt in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. It will overcome attachment to rites and rituals as a path to liberation. And the defilements will then lessen. The defilements, because of our wisdom, because of our faith, and because of our conviction, will gradually become weaker. And when we investigate the body, when we investigate like this, then the body becomes light. The citta, the mind, will become very buoyant and bright. When the citta is developed in this way, then it leads the Buddhachona, that is the unenlightened person, to become an enlightened person, a liberated person, someone who has overcome suffering. To give the example, if we train the mind continuously and stabilize the mind on one point, then that mind can take us to peace. And I'll give an example of the breath. If we can hold the feeling of the breath at the tip of the nose and keep our minds on that feeling of the breath at the tip of the nose, the inhalation coming in and the exhalation going out at the tip of the nose, then that mind held there for a long period of time will gradually become peaceful. The body will become buoyant and light. The mind will become buoyant and light. The mind which is buoyant and light will experience happiness and joy, and that will lead to one-pointedness of mind, ekagata. That is the mind, the citta, which is single-focused or single-minded on one aramana, single-minded on one object, one-pointed, as they say. And this single-pointedness of mind, when we come out of that state, that will lead to the development of wisdom. Why will it lead to the development of wisdom? Because peace allows us to see things clearly as they really are, to understand things. When we're peaceful, then we see things clearly. Samadhi has the benefit of leading to wisdom. If we're of the temperament where we like to reflect and investigate Dhamma, then we also have to be very careful not to over-investigate. If we do too much investigation and the citta never experiences any joy or happiness, our citta is confused and all over the place, is endlessly thinking and endlessly scattered through this continual investigation and contemplation of whatever subject we're investigating, then that will not lead to peace. It leads to continued restlessness. That shows that we need to calm the mind down. We need to develop samadhi. So if you over-reflect and do not develop any samadhi, you not experience any joy or happiness, then the citta will be scattered and diverse and dispersed. So we need to develop lots of peace and a sense of ease in the mind, a sense of comfort in the mind. One way of bringing the mind to stillness is to develop the contemplation of a supagamathan, the contemplation of the non-beautiful, the loathsome, the unpleasant aspects of the body, to see the body as it really is, to break the body up and see the body. It is not beautiful. There's nowhere where it's beautiful. There's nowhere to delight in this body. And when we see the body as not beautiful, then we see the path to peace. We see the path to liberation. We see the magga, that is the Aryan path. We can develop this contemplation of the four elements, and that also allows us to see the Aryan path. Ajahn greatly encouraged us to develop this contemplation of a supa, to not get caught up in our likes and dislikes. When we develop a supagamathan, when we develop investigation of the four elements, or we develop contemplation of death, then we give up our likes and dislikes. We give up our attractions and aversions. And so we can investigate things, we can investigate this body, we can contemplate death, we can investigate the four elements, we can consider all sankharas as just arising and passing away. And when we do this, then vipassana jnana can arise, that is, clear knowledge and insight and understanding, that is, the knowledges that arise through vipassana. And then the mind becomes courageous. When vipassana jnanas arise, we start to see things very clearly, and the mind becomes very courageous to investigate. So we have to contemplate things a lot and investigate often, frequently, over and over again. Don't just do it one-off, do it over and over again. And sometimes your mind, when you're sitting meditation, sitting samadhi, may come together room, they say in Thai, to come together into samadhi. And at that time, if your mind gathers into samadhi, gathers into one point, the mind might feel like it's completely solid, stable, unified. And that sensation of unity and stability of the mind can last all day. That sort of samadhi is firm and suitable for putting to work. But in that form of samadhi, one has to be slightly careful that we do not want to reflect. The mind is so solid and stable in peace and tranquility that we do not want to bring up the body for contemplation because the body seems such a coarse object. We want to just stay in that beautiful bliss and tranquility. We do not want to reflect. So sometimes we have to apply that stability of mind, that strength of samadhi, to consider and investigate the body. Go against the tendency not to consider the body, so that we're using the power of samadhi to investigate the rupa khanda, the body. And then when we investigate the body, we'll see that the citta, the mind, and the body, the rupa, is separate things. The citta and the body are separate things. They are not us. They're not me. They are not mine. They're not self. They're not under the control of self. And this is when jnana, knowledge and insight arises, when understanding arises. This is when one can become a stream enterer. This is when one can see the Dhamma. And we may have heard of a person seeing the Dhamma, or at this point when we see that the citta, the mind and body are totally separate and not us, not self, not me and mine. And jnana, the knowledge and insight, arises in us, then this leads to this freeing, this liberating quality of becoming someone who's got a foundation in Dhamma, and their mind will be completely at peace. Their mind will be still and good and wholesome. So we must endeavour to develop peace and tranquility. We must also be very patient in our practice, because our practice is going against our tendencies, going against our defilements. Our tendency is to eat a lot when we should eat little. So go against the habit of eating a lot. Know yourself and know. Go against the grain, go against the habit of eating too much. Train yourself. Put forth effort to train, going against eating, sleeping and talking too much. And in this way, if we train the mind, then the citta, if we're willing to go against the natural tendencies of the defilements, we'll be gradually chipping away at the defilements, gradually wearing away of the defilements, and the defilements, the kilesas, will become less, and our cittas, our minds, will become more peaceful. And then we will see the path, we'll see the magga, we'll see the pathway to peace, and our minds will change profoundly, change ultimately. We will see samuti satcha, that is, we'll see conventional reality and we'll see ultimate reality. And when we see ultimate reality, then we'll see the Dhamma. When we see the Dhamma, we'll see the Buddha in our own hearts, and we'll know the truth clearly for ourselves. We will see the truth. All of you who are here are already on the path. You've already progressed a long way. You're already on the path of generosity by developing and cultivating generosity and service. You're already on the path of purifying virtue and sila. You've already ordained and gone forth. You've already given up so much. You're already walking the path of the Lord Buddha. We've already given up so many defilements at so many different levels. Now it is the time to develop our practice further and cultivate the mind further, we have the temperament and the characteristics to cultivate this life fully. So give this life fully to the Buddha, give this life fully to the cultivation of the path, so that you know the path for yourself. And when you know the path for yourself, you have no more doubts. And when you have no more doubts, then you really come to peace. I would like to now end the talk here. Is there any questions? There was a question earlier about how to investigate the four elements, but I think in the talk that he gave just a moment ago, it seemed to be covered. Yes? Was it covered enough? Was it covered enough, Damuri? Or do you want to hear? The question was for all of us keeping the rains retreat here, what should be our goal, what should be our aim for this rains retreat? We should establish aims because we're staying in one place for the 3 months of the rains. So set up goals. Those goals should be to keep the kawat, the duties and responsibilities. One can establish, say, a determination. For example, just to abide on alms food, the food that you get in your alms bowl. For example, eating dokpat. Or one may make the adhitthana, the determination, to go without sleep. One may make the determination to speak little, to not speak unnecessarily. All these things are ways of cutting off the defilements. They're to go against the defilements. And why do we do this? It is to aim towards peace and tranquility. So we should establish a goal that will make ourselves more peaceful by giving up defilements. So we have to make ourselves more peaceful by being aware of thought. If you're conscious that your thinking is all over the place, scattered and endlessly thinking about this and that, then try to make your aim to reduce that thought down. Reduce the thinking to the point where you will purposely not think of anything outside of the monastery or anything out in the future or the past. Gradually bring the mind in to the present moment. Ajahn used to encourage us to do this. He used to give the simile of one monk would make the determination in the rains, here I am in the rains retreat. This whole rains retreat, I will not think anything about life outside the monastery. He said that's one way of reducing down confusion. That's one way of being slightly peaceful. Another monk may think, I will keep all my thinking not only from going outside the monastery, but going outside this kuti. So he goes back and just stays in the kuti. Another monk may determine, I will keep my thinking not only from going outside the monastery or outside this kuti, I will keep it from going outside this body. I will keep the mind in contemplating and investigating this body and not let the mind go beyond awareness and mindfulness of the body. And why do we do that? It's to reduce and bring the mind into one point, to compose the mind and bring the mind closer and closer in. So we're drawing it down into a single point. And the reason we draw it down into a single point and reduce it into one spot is so that we experience peace and tranquility. So your aim, this rains retreat, is to experience peace and stability and tranquility of the mind. So the question was concerning anatta. If there is no self, no entity in us, what makes us continue to live in samsara? On the night of the Buddha's enlightenment, the Buddha remembered all his previous lives, which means, in my eyes, that something continues in us. No soul, nothing at all. And the response: when there is still in the mind greed, hatred and delusion, then that mind, because it is deluded, it is fooled, creates an illusion of self. It perceives and understands that in that greed, hatred and delusion there is a me, there is a self, there is an I, there is an entity. And when we create this perception of self, then action is done through the perception of a self, this false illusion of a self. So we create karma with the false perception that I am doing this act. And so when we do good karma, that creates a good result and leads to happiness. When we create bad karma, we do bad actions, do something unskillful, with the perception that I am doing this is me, this is mine, this is me experiencing this, and I am fulfilling this action, then that leads to suffering, the perception that I suffer, because we have this perception of I doing. And then maybe we may develop and progress and start practicing virtue and Dhamma, silatham, that is virtue and Dhamma, virtue and truth, or the path. But we still have this perception that I am doing this path, I am practicing. And through this false perception, this misunderstanding of a self developing the path, it is this sense of I am progressing, I am doing this action. Even when we develop samadhi and peaceful states of mind, there's still this false perception that it's I that are peaceful. It is me that is cool and calm because of this false perception of self. It's a misunderstanding, the preconception that I am doing this, I am experiencing this. There is this, when we develop samadhi and when we develop wisdom, then we start to contemplate and investigate this holding on to this concept of self. When we come out of a peaceful state of mind, we come out of samadhi, then we can start to develop wisdom, the wisdom to reflect, who is this that holds on to this perception that I am the doer, I am self, it is me, it is mine. When we start to look at this concept of self, we see that the feeling or perception of self, the thought of self, is not permanent. It's not constant. It is unsatisfactory. It is not us. When we see things as impermanent, not satisfactory, then we start to see that we have falsely taken this to be self, that there is not really an ever-abiding self there. It is changing. And then when we start to develop the Aryan Noble Eightfold Path, wisdom arises, and we start to cultivate this mind. Then we start to see it is just this chitta's misconception, the mind's misconception of self, which leads to the endless birth and death in samsara, the continuous cycle of birth and death. There is just body and mind. And body and mind is constantly changing. Body and mind is subject to anicca, dukkha and anatta. And when we start to see this, we start to see that this is the deathless dhatu. We see this constant arising and passing away. that there is no self there, that is just conditioned phenomena, and in the end we see the deathless element. I'll read this out in English first. If one wants to practice a lot like the Kulbachans, but has problems with, nauseous visions. Okay. If one tries to increase the amount of practice, one gets, nauseous and tension in the head, which prevents meditation. Is there a way to overcome this so one is able to increase one's effort? Okay, nauseous. We have to know our own strengths and know our own abilities. If our strength is not yet developed, then we can't force and press and force the mind to make it in a particular way. If we put too much pressure and too much force on ourselves to make the mind in a particular way, then that will have consequences, especially if it's to the point that we make ourselves physically sick and make the mind stressed out. So we have to know our abilities, we have to know our strengths. We're not trying to make the physical body sick in practice. That's not the right way of practice. That's not correct. That's the Akiñcano yoga, or that's putting wrong practice, putting too much suffering on this body and mind. If you use too much force and just willpower, then that is not necessarily the best thing. We have to know our own abilities, know our strengths and weaknesses. Ajahn gave a simile is some people look at the Buddha and they get discouraged because they think, he can do so much. But you have to remember, the Buddha was like someone with a huge vehicle, like a large vehicle. We are just driving a small car, a small cart. So we have to make use of that vehicle, know what we've got. We don't try and compare ourselves with others. If we do this, then we'll practice correctly, not being unaware of our own abilities and our own strengths. The practice, what is the practice which is the best for developing the mind? Difficult to read the particular question, but I'll try and answer in summary of the response. The best way of practice is to develop the whole practice, the cultivation of the body, speech and mind, and we're doing this in accordance to the Noble Eightfold Path, and so we develop our body and speech by keeping those factors of the path which are to do with virtue. We develop our livelihood by developing those aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path which are to do with livelihood. We develop samadhi and samadhi by developing those aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path that are to do with samadhi. And the last bit was we develop sati, so that we're developing a mindfulness to overcome fault-finding, the fault-finding mind, the mind which finds fault with other people. We're trying to overcome a view of selfishness and overcome self-concern. And so when we're developing this view of overcoming this selfishness and self-concern, then it develops a sense of loving-kindness. And when there's loving-kindness and metta, then that's a brahmavihara. And that makes the mind full and delighted in goodness and full and delighted in happiness. And that leads to wisdom and understanding. So the way of practice is the development of this Noble Eightfold Path, so that we're developing both wisdom and understanding.